Alter Bridge with The Last Hero. A couple numbers that's going to determine a lot on this album, I feel. 13 is the first one. That's the number of tracks that's on the standard edition of this album. There are bonus tracks for you to digest if you wish on deluxe versions or via iTunes. 66 minutes is the length of time that this album does span, and of course with the deluxe version you do get even more time based off of that as well. And number one, which is track one, Show Me a Leader, which is the first single that we got off of this disc, and it's one that here in 2016 certainly seems to have a little bit of relevance, not to mention it's something that does set up some themology that this album does possess. So let's talk about it. 13 tracks, 66 minutes. Timing is not usually something we complain about a lot. We're going to hope that trend continues with this disc. So, looking in at Show Me a Leader, we understand what this track is. We've talked about it already. If you missed that track review, there's going to be a link for it somewhere for you to scope it out in more detail. It's 5 minutes, starts off the album, and I'm starting to become sort of, I guess, disillusioned or something. Typically, I've not had a problem with first tracks being singles on a release, and I feel like this is a mistake at times, and this is one of them, because I feel like you could really elevate this song to even higher standard than it already is based around some of the things that are surrounding it, but instead this is your first taste of The Last Hero, and it's not a bad taste whatsoever. In fact, it's very strong, but it's something that may have been a little bit boosted up by the next two tracks off of the disc, The Writing on the Wall and The Other Side. Maybe just make Show Me a Leader track 3 and Writing on the Wall 1, Other Side 2, and you may have just boosted up the value of Show Me a Leader a little bit more. But it's interesting considering this could easily be seen as a bit of a story of sorts. Show Me a Leader could easily showcase the desire for a better choice, either that or somebody with true, the true leadership capability in the world that surrounds. And then The Writing on the Wall on the Other Side really showcasing some of the debate points, either that or Writing on the Wall really showcasing what some things sort of mean, that hidden meaning that's not all that hidden. But either way, the music is what we're here to discuss, and what you get here is that post-grunge sound that does have a very Alice in Chains sort of feel to it with construction. Imagine if Alice in Chains, instead of getting William Duvall, had Miles Kennedy at the vocal helm. How weird would that sound? But that's kind of what you get here, because this is a bit darker than what you have gotten with Fortress and AB3 that have preceded it, although I feel that Fortress was darker than AB3. Like, they're slowly but surely gaining a little bit more of a darker register to their music, Alter Bridge is, and it's kind of welcome considering that is a side that does allow Miles' voice to shine at its full range. You can hear him kind of go toward that lower end of his range, which is really a mid to the rest of us, and then whenever he has to, just rear back and echo and scream a loud reply, it's something that gives a track with that little bit of extra, darker balance to it, a lot of power. It's delivered with a lot of power. That is one of the key themes for the first half of this disc. My Champion kind of keeps the theme going of Show Me a Leader, The Last Hero, My Champion. We need somebody in this world that's going to be a champion. It's a pretty good track, and one that after the first three echoes and glistens sort of like a single would, but then you get the Poison in Your Veins and then Cradle to the Grave. The first 5 tracks of this album before Cradle to the Grave, you're already kind of exhausted, and that's a little bit of a problem that we're going to talk about a little later on, so stick around. But Cradle to the Grave is excellent, and the reason why is because after those 5 tracks of having just a ton to digest, you get this mid to quicker range rock music. It's soaring all around. There's guitar solos. Tremonti's doing his thing. Miles is doing vocal heroics. Cradle to the Grave softens things down. It does what you need. You need like a little bit of an intermission. You need a little bit of a sort of come down period, and that's what this song really does, and it handles it absolutely wonderfully. This could be a single very easily. It made the hair on my arm stand up after 7 playthroughs of this album, and that's the sign of a track that's got a great overall frame, a great songwriting philosophy, and it does. It's really one that it glistens in the way it handles its verses leading into its chorus. It just has a nice flow to it, and the lyrics feel very personal. They feel very much like you are learning a little bit more about Miles, or You're learning a little bit more about somebody that Miles is speaking about. It has sort of that very relatable flavor to it. So very good job on this. It's an early highlight of this album, which cannot be said about Losing Patience, which feels like it has a little bit of some of the old Creed pretenses, although not really the strongest Alter Bridge song. There is a little bit on this album that makes me feel like, especially with My Champion, I almost feel like this is a Creed lick that was sort of recycled, you know. Tremonti had this in his bag of tricks for like 15 years, and now all of a sudden they get the opportunity to use it, and it kind of glistens a bit. But I say that because this side of Fate, there's Muse in this. There's Muse in this. 6 minutes, 47 seconds. There's Muse in this. The way in which this is constructed just screams the band Muse. And man, is it delightful. It is an excellent, excellent venture. Now, this is one that throughout its first 2 minutes doesn't feel like it's, going any place atypical of what Alter Bridge does. And then its middle portion just transforms this song, and they do exactly what you're supposed to do with a near 7-minute long cut. You make it interesting. You don't just stick with the same idea, unless you're Sun or a doom metal band, something of that variety, where that's kind of what's clamored for, and you have a good enough riff to back it up. This is a song, though, that's that little deviation in the middle, that little Muse, dive is certainly well received. It almost grants this as a bit of a progressive track. Instead, though, this really reminds me more of some of the wonderful exploration that you got out of alternative music and grunge music and rock music in the 1990s, where it was not atypical to find an album that had 3-minute singles, but also a couple of 6 or 7 minute long cuts that just went to some of the darker places or the weirder places within the band's minds. And those are usually the tracks that end up standing out quite a bit. And this is a song that stands out within the same way. Now, you will be remembered, track number 9 has 2 distinctions. The first of which is that this is a song that feels like it could be a crossover goldmine. It's a crossover goldmine, it is. You could take this to country radio, you could take this to modern rock radio, you could take this to pop radio because of its message. And I think Alter Bridge has something here. I really do. If this is released as a single, do not be surprised, first of all. If it is not, I will think that Alter Bridge passed up on a potential, huge opportunity. This song has a lot of value to it. It echoes so many of the sentiments that we, echo a lot here in America. I apologize to our European friends on that one. Although you may even get a lot of that from this song as well, simply because the concept is one that's universal. It's not one that is only understated by one area or, one person. This is instead one that can be applied to everybody. But of course, here in America, one thing that is true is that, hand on your heart, tribute to the troops, veterans, blah, blah, that patriotism, and this song seems to feed into that a little bit. But it could be applied for just about any country. It could apply for just about any person. So don't let that sort of fool you into thinking that this is just a blatant attempt at patriotic mush. The mush, though, comes after this, and by this point, going into track 10, Crows on a Wire, which is an alright cut, into Twilight Island of Fools, and finally into The Last Hero, you're exhausted. You really are, and that's one thing that this album suffers from. You're absolutely exhausted, and these tracks don't give you enough sort of new material or new sounds to work with. It's where the band starts to feel a little bit formulaic and feel a little bit like they have, they're trying a little bit too hard. They have all these tracks and they could not maybe fine-tooth comb a couple of them out. This album may have been better off as 54 minutes rather than 66 in its 13 tracks. And that's just a personal opinion. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of Alter Bridge fans that think that this is flawless, and having 70 minutes close to of new Alter Bridge material is the equivalent of dying and going to heaven. But whenever I look at this as, a pair of unbiased eyes, this gets to be a bit exhaustive. And even with subsequent listens, that feeling does not go away. That feeling does not dissolve. And with other albums, that feeling has dissolved because you know what's coming. With this one, you know what's coming, and it still is exhausting. So I think that there were some errors of judgment there, and this is also a very loud album. I think it's another one that's been fallen victim to the loudness war. Their producer just Is he going to die if he doesn't throw all this stuff in? Wow, it's pretty crazy. This is a very loud album, and I think that does add to some of the exhaustion. It's not one that feels like you're at a show, and it's loud because you're right near the front and the amps are blazing. This is instead one that just feels like a bit of a direct assault, and for the first half of this album, the first 65% of this disc, you're fine with it, but that last 35 becomes a challenge. It really does. And The Last Hero is a good song, too. That's the problem. You know, this final cut off of this disc, it's par for the course for Alter Bridge, but it's at least above average. But at this point in time, do you really care? It's not Blackbird, it's not Fortress, it's not any of their, major singles or any of your favorite songs. This one just feels very standard, and that really kind of hurts this album a little bit. If it weren't as long, if it had a little bit more of a fine-tooth comb sort of run through it, and also if some of that production was just dialed back a little bit, maybe use a little bit more touch as opposed to just, I think this album would have a lot more going for it. Not to say that it doesn't, because it has Tremonti is Tremonti. He's one of the best guitar players on the planet. If you don't want to admit that the guy from Creed is one of the best guitar players on the planet, I'm sorry. There's nothing more that we can do for you. You are a lost cause. It's just the truth. Sometimes you have to admit the truth, even if it hurts. And this is one of those scenarios, and has been for quite some time. And Miles Kennedy is a, god-tier vocalist. He's got a great voice, great sound. He's shown it throughout his career, and he does so on this album. Once again, there's just too much. 84 out of 100 for this disc, bogged down by some simplicities, but aside from that, songwriting was very tight. That darkness and that darker theme certainly helped this band out a little bit. Still has the potential for this album to be right up there for alternative/rock album of the year, though, considering it's the guitar album that we don't see nearly enough in rock music these days, and we wish that we would. I want to know what you guys think. What do you think about The Last Hero by Alter Bridge? Let me know in the comments below. My name is coverkillernation, and I'll talk to each and every one of you guys very, very soon. We have a Green Day album to talk about, amazingly enough. Yeah, that band. I'm not taking a holiday from that. I can't believe I made that joke. No, don't call me an American idiot, you son of a... Fuck you!